Archetypes exist in fighting games for a reason, and for a very good reason. It gives meaning to a playstyle, and these characters become iconic in those series. You've got Akuma and Ryu, you've got Kazuya and Heihachi, you've got Akira, hell, you can even say Goku and Vegeta. There's certain things you just have to have in some games or some animes or whatever that is. It makes that particular thing unique. If you play a character, much like me, I'm sure you pick them up because you like that specific playstyle, but it makes less sense when that playstyle is sort of spread out, and it's even more annoying when that playstyle is not represented in the game. So with MK11, I feel like there are a lot of key characters missing from the roster. So the aim of this video is basically to point out why I want certain characters on the game and why I think they should be on every single Mortal Kombat roster. Now your character might not be here, and that's not me saying that I don't want them in the game. This list is more for the characters that are essential. So you take this list and you would build on top of it. You would add characters like Fujin, or you would add characters like Tanya. But the characters on this list, and I know I've given you away, Fujin and Tanya are not on this list, so if they're your favorite character, you might want to tune out now. These are the essential characters that need to be in every Mortal Kombat game. The way Ryu and Ken are in every Street Fighter game, I feel like these characters need to be in every single MK game. And MK has a huge roster, so this list is a little bit long, but bear with me, I'll go through it and I'll explain why I want these characters in the game. So with all that said, let's begin the list. To begin, I've got Ermac and Kenshi as the psychic characters. I think that this is a really cool concept for a character, and I think MK should capitalize on that. Ermac and Kenshi should never be missing from a roster, and I don't mean having both of them in the game at the same time. You can have both of them in the game, much like MK9 did, and MKX for that matter, but a psychic style should always be present in Mortal Kombat. I don't feel like it should just never be there. It's something unique to the game, you know. Tekken doesn't have a psychic type character, Street Fighter doesn't have a psychic type character, Virtua Fighter, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a psychic type character. I feel like either Ermac or Kenshi should always be on the roster, and I lean more towards Ermac because he's one of the original ninjas, but either or would be great. It would be great if they were like a mid-range character. They sort of kept you at arm's length and they played footsies with their telekinesis. So I have Ermac and Kenshi listed as the psychic types that should always be in Mortal Kombat, one or the other. Next up we've got Jax, who would basically be the rush down military muscle style. He's got those two massive arms. I don't think Jackie Briggs needs to be playable. I'm not saying you have to write her out of the story, but taking up a slot on the roster, I'm not really understanding why. If Jax is there, what does Jackie need to be there for? I don't feel like she should have taken his dash punch. Altogether, that character seems irrelevant when Jax is on the roster. Jax is also an iconic character. He's very recognizable. I think that Jax should always be featured in Mortal Kombat no matter what. I'm not a huge fan of killing characters and then not having them on the roster because it just takes away from the gameplay experience. It's all fine having that in a story, but the story is good for one day. Once you've passed that, that's it. It's game over. You're going to go back to the gameplay, so missing out on characters like Jax doesn't really make sense to me. So again, Jax is another essential part of the roster. Next up, we've got Kung Lao, and Kung Lao to me represents Ip Man. He's a Shaolin monk. He's got an awesome fighting style. He's very, very iconic. He's got an iconic fighting style, and he's got that sword on his head that acts as a hat as well. This character needs to be in every Mortal Kombat game. He is a Mortal Kombat original through and through. You can't leave Kung Lao off the roster. Next up, we've got Shang Tsung or Quan Chi. You can have both. You can have either or. It doesn't matter, but a sorcerer type is needed on the Mortal Kombat roster. People identify sorcery with Mortal Kombat a lot. I know I do. So I feel like leaving one of those two guys off of the roster would be a loss, really. It's something that is special to Mortal Kombat. It's like leaving Akuma off Street Fighter. It doesn't make sense. So Shang Tsung or Quan Chi would represent the sorcerer type. Next up, you've got the Wraith, Noob Saibot. There is a lot of confusion with who is undead and how they are undead in Mortal Kombat. You've got Wraiths, you've got specters, you've got zombies, you've got everything in between, and they never really distinguish what they are. So to me, Noob Saibot is the main Wraith in Mortal Kombat. He uses clones to fight, a clone-based character. I think something like that, again, is essential to Mortal Kombat. That archetype where you're using clones to attack people is so cool. I don't know why you would ever leave that out. Noob Saibot was missing from MKX for reasons that are unknown to me. If you say it's because of the story, really just honestly, like, don't want to hear it. Like, it's so irritating when people do that. We need stuff that is long-lasting for the gameplay. There are so many characters in MK that you can use to build on top of this roster that I'm giving you. There's no need to leave out the essentials. And I'm willing to bet that more people are willing to sacrifice other game modes to make sure that characters get in first, and then we'll be happy to pay for DLC. I'll be happy to support the game, but the essential roster needs to be there. Next up, you've got Reptile, one of the original ninjas. He would be the acidic type. No other ninjas in Mortal Kombat use acid the way that Reptile does. Now the closest thing we've got to Reptile is Aaron Black's acid attack and Shang Tsung turning into him briefly. I don't feel like Reptile should ever be missing from a game. He's a fan favorite. Really explore on his acidic type moves, and there's no reason to leave him off the roster. There's just no reason. Reptile should always be on a Mortal Kombat roster. Next up, we've got a very obvious one, and that is Scorpion. Scorpion is embedded in the Mortal Kombat legacy. You can't have a Mortal Kombat game without him now. I think they've missed out on one canonical one where Scorpion's not in it, and that was years and years and years ago when I was a kid. Scorpion's the Fire Ninja. He's a Spectre, so he's different from Noob Saibot. He's not a Wraith, he's a Spectre. And he could represent that. He could represent the type of character that becomes a Spectre, uses their firepower even whilst they're alive and they're not the undead, whereas Noob Saibot is the undead. All of this aside, you can't have a Mortal Kombat game without Scorpion. It just shouldn't happen. Next up, you've got Sector and Cyrax. Sector and Cyrax, again, they represent the robotic side of Mortal Kombat. They're iconic characters. People love them. Some popular members of our community have become known as ketchup and mustard through them. It's weird that they get left off of rosters so often. They are really cool characters. They are unique as well. They don't play the same. They're much like Scorpion and Sub-Zero. You know, you gotta have Sector and Cyrax in the game. It's weird that they leave them off. Next up, you've got Smoke. Smoke is a fan favorite. He is one of my favorite characters. The way he moves around the screen, and I'm talking about human Smoke, not Cyber Smoke or robotic Smoke or whatever he's called. Talking about human Smoke should not be left off of the roster. He's a very, very cool character, and honest to God, it pains me to no end to know that they chose Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs. I know I hate on these characters so much. You guys are probably tired of hearing it, but Smoke's not on the roster, and that honestly does my head in. Next up, we've got another obvious one, much like Scorpion. Sub-Zero just can't be left off the roster. He represents the ice type. I'm talking about this like it's Pokemon, but Sub-Zero is also heavily embedded in the Mortal Kombat storyline. He's never missed a Mortal Kombat game ever. Like, I don't think there's a single one that doesn't have Sub-Zero in it, and to counter the fire that is Scorpion, you gotta have the ice. So Sub-Zero, again, essential character on the roster. Next up, we've got Jade. Now, Jade is essential to me because she represents a ninja that can use moves where projectiles pass through you, and to me that's okay. Now, the way they've implemented it in Mortal Kombat, the way they've implemented her into Mortal Kombat 11 isn't the best thing. Honestly, it's quite boring, but I do think she is an essential part of the roster. I think she is iconic. I think people do like her, they just don't like fighting her in MK11, and trust me, I understand you. Princess Kitana is obviously a given. She has to be in the game. I like the uniqueness with the fans and the wind and how she fights. I think that's all really cool. With Kitana comes Melina, the more savage version of her. I think Kitana and Melina, they have to be in a Mortal Kombat game. I think they are great additions to the game. They're iconic female characters. It's bizarre. It's so weird that they left Melina out of MK11, especially with all the fractured timelines. But who knows? She might come back in DLC. We never know. The game's not going anywhere just yet, although the fan base is not making it easy for us. Next up, you have Johnny Cage. He's the cocky Hollywood guy. Everyone loves Johnny Cage. If Johnny Cage is in the game, you don't need Cassie Cage. It's absolutely just pointless. She takes up a spot in the roster, which Smoke could be on. So keep Johnny Cage in the game. Get rid of Cassie Cage. We don't need her. But Johnny, again, is another iconic character, and he's essential to the Mortal Kombat roster. And then we've got a speedster in Cabal. Now, Cabal to me is extremely disappointing at MK11 because outside of having a really fast Nomad dash, his regular attacks are not really all that fast. They're just very safe, and he has no gaps in his string, but he's not really like acting like a speedster. He's not fighting like a speedster. So I think Cabal should be in every Mortal Kombat game, although I think they should revamp how they've designed him. I think a speedster is really good to have an archetype in the game, and I personally think it's very, very cool. He's a cool character anyway. Next up, this is a given, but it's Liu Kang. And Liu Kang, simply put, represents Bruce Lee. And every fighting game, if they aim to be successful, they have to represent Bruce Lee. I don't make the rules, that's just how it is. He should be up in your face, he should be countering. I'm not really a fan of the zoning war that's going on in Mortal Kombat 11 with Liu Kang. I feel like he should be more rushed down while still making sense, but not be as much a zoner character. Being a zoner for Liu Kang is weird to me. I would leave that for someone like Sonya Blade, who I also think is essential to the roster, and whilst people don't really like her, I attribute a lot of that to Ronda Rousey doing a terrible job on her voice. Again, no disrespect to Ronda, just didn't like the voice. But Sonya should play differently from Jax in that they both use military style weapons or fighting style, but Sonya should be more of a keep away character where she uses drones and guns to keep you out. I don't feel like she should be a mix-up character in your face. I feel like that clashes with what she should be like or what her archetype is. But of course, Sonya and Jax are both essential to the Mortal Kombat roster. They're iconic characters. People recognize Sonya. I don't feel like she should be left off the list. And that brings me on to Lord Raiden, the Thunder God. There should always be a godly representation in Mortal Kombat, and that should be Raiden. Everyone knows Raiden. Raiden is very iconic. The look is iconic. The powers are iconic. The Superman spear attack that he's got is very iconic, especially the sound that he makes. Raiden should never be left off a roster, and I think it's weird when they do leave him out. It's really really odd to me. And lastly, I've got Shokan written down here, and Shokan refers to either Kintaro, Goro, Shiva, or one other Shokan. I even saw a Shokan in the comics that had 6 arms. I think Mortal Kombat should always have one of these monster representatives in it. Now I wrote down Shokan, but it could be someone like Oni Moloch, it could be someone like Onaga, Goro, it could be any of them. A monster type character I feel like is a great addition to Mortal Kombat. Now with all that said, those are my essential characters. I don't feel like that should be all there is to the roster. They should add to it. Like I said, Mortal Kombat has a massive roster, and I think people are more concerned about the depth of the roster and the gameplay than Towers of Time, arcade mode, story mode. We can pay for all those later at a reasonable price obviously, but people care more about the depth of the roster and how the gameplay is and having their favorite characters there. Now if I missed out your favorite character, pop them in the comment section below, explain why you'd want them in the game, explain what they do that is unique to everyone else, explain if they're iconic enough. I'd like to hear what you guys think, but as always guys, been a pleasure, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Peace.